College basketball games have been going on for a while now, and to end each season, a 68-team single elimination tournament is played over the course of a month. This tournament, referred to as March Madness, would become one of the most hyped sporting events in the nation. In this video, we will explore the growth of the intercollegiate sport. Here is the history of college basketball. Basketball was invented in a YMCA gymnasium in Springfield by James Naismith. If you want to know the original 13 rules and its development, check out this video. Anyway, Eastern campuses took interest in the new sport in 1893. The first known college to play a basketball game took place on February 7th. Soon, numerous schools started playing intercollegiate, and by 1900, the game had spread across the country. However, basketball didn't get much popular until much later. Even though it became an Olympic sport, having no shot clock made games low-scoring and long, and fans started declining. On December 17th, 1934, basketball got its revival. At Madison Square Garden, New York City, the first doubleheader was scheduled. Both games were played in two 20-minute halves of two D1 colleges we know today. From then on out, college basketball would only get more and more popular. Hank Luzetti of Stanford invented a new jump shot, and the NIT became the first national tournament. Later, the NCAA created a new tournament in 1939 to culminate each season. The 8 best teams would duel in a single elimination bracket until one was left. These 8 teams would later become 68 for what we know today as March Madness. These two tournaments were equally prestigious and would be for the next few decades. However, the NCAA tournament would soon grow more popular, leading it to hold the best teams while the NIT held the ones that couldn't quite reach March Madness. In 1946, the NBA was founded. Okay, NBA, you're a new league and it's hard to tell if you're gonna blow up in the future, so you need to get every good college player you could find. There's a 2-time champ at Oklahoma A&M named Bob Kurland. He's a 7-foot monster and also the first player to dunk. We need to get him. We just gave him an offer. Oh, what'd he say? He passed. It seemed the NBA wasn't a great recruiting league, but once it merged with the BAA, it would receive much more prestige. An NBA draft in '47 led to more college talent, such as Bill Russell in San Fran, Wilt Chamberlain in Kansas, Jerry West in West Virginia, the Big O in Cincinnati, and Elgin Baylor in Seattle. In '58, Kentucky would win their 4th national title under great coach Adolph Rupp, becoming Kentucky's first of 5 coaches to win a title. And Coach Case started a tradition by cutting the net. Look, it's Duke and North Carolina. These teams aren't exactly rivals until... No, never mind, now they hate each other. Dean Smith, get over here, clean this up. Dean Smith cleaned up the Tar Heels, and now they're much better. The Duke Blue Devils might also need some cleaning up too, as they keep on failing to make it to the promised land. If we're gonna win a title, we need every good high schooler there is. Okay, so there's a guy named Bill Bradley. He's smart, tall, and really good at basketball. We need Bill. Yeah, I just gave him a scholarship. Oh, what'd he say? He turned it down for Princeton. Bruh. Right now, basketball in the East is really popular. Maybe a little too popular. Hold my honey. Yup, that's UCLA. They're gonna win 10 national titles and dominate the league from the 60s to 70s with John Wooden, the Wizard of Westwood, as their head coach. How'd they do it? Here we got the pyramid scheme for success. Remember the main principles for success: teamwork, tone, tenacity, and most importantly, friendship. Okay, here's how it works. I'm at the top. Lou, Bill, Gail, Walt, keep on scoring and you'll soon be in the NBA, and for the rest of you, just focus on friendship.
Nice.
In the meantime, racism in basketball is high on the regional agenda. In the '66 championship, Texas Western, now UTEP, put in 5 black starters against Kentucky's all-white starters. Led by Bobby Joe Hill, the Miners upset Kentucky for a title, and basketball would soon integrate their programs, including an entire historically black conference. As UCLA is still dominating, some other players are displaying their talent. Dan the Horse Issel is on Kentucky, Elvin Hayes in Houston, Pistol Pete is becoming a monster on LSU with the most single-season points in NCAA history, and Austin Carr just dropped 61 points in the tourney. Meanwhile, a rule change regarding the NBA draft was made in 1970 when Spencer Hayward signed with the NBA before his graduation. Now, players can spend as little as 1 year before entering the draft. Welcome to the 70s. There are currently 5 powerhouse conferences. The ACC is becoming a national power with Duke, UNC, and NC State. Kentucky is leading the SEC with Jack Givens, and the Kansas schools are in the Big 8. Indiana and the Big 10 went entirely undefeated in '76, and there is finally success up in Michigan. Finally, UCLA racked up an 88-game winning streak for the Pac-8, still under John Wooden. In the meantime, many schools such as Notre Dame and Marquette played as independents or without a conference. However, as television ratings rose, those independents unified into conferences. Like the Big East, the Big East would become a powerhouse conference which held some fierce rivalries. But you know what? Who cares about these lame rivalries? No, I want to see Duke and North Carolina. These squads are ballin' in the 70s. And in one of their games, North Carolina had this really great plan going into it. Crap, said Boston College in '79. It turns out the Eagles' point-shaving plan was foiled. Anyway, let's make the tournament bigger. How about 32, 48, 64 teams? This meant winning the tournament and correctly predicting it would be much more difficult. Only the best of the best could win, like future NBA stars Larry Bird on Indiana State and Magic Johnson on Michigan State. Magic held off Indiana State to end their undefeated season. That was a good way to cap off March Madness, and from then on out, it would only get better. In the 80s, college basketball would skyrocket in popularity alongside the NBA. Unfortunately, Larry and Magic are in the pros, but there are many more deep threats in the league. Like Louisville. Right now it's Louisville. They have Darrell Griffith. Oh, now he's gone. So Indiana with Bobby Knight and Isaiah Thomas took the title next year. Okay, who's next? Georgetown. Georgetown's next. They have a star in Patrick Ewing. But then there's always Virginia with Ralph Sampson. Sampson would show amazing speed, rebounding, and shooting as a center, and would win National Player of the Year 3 times. Well, none of these teams won it all. It was actually North Carolina. Yep, it turns out the Tar Heels had a superstar in their lineup by the name of Michael Jordan. Him, James Worthy, and Fred Brown would help win the 1982 title, and Jordan would later become the greatest basketball player ever. However, UNC was knocked off the next year, leading their in-state rivals NC State to the finals during their Cinderella run. In the '83 finals, tied at 52 against the best defense in the league, Houston, with Akeem the Dream Olajuwon and Clyde the Glide Drexler, NC State had a chance to upset the Cougars in the final seconds. The Lorenzo Charles game-winning dunk would knock off the Phi Slamma Jamma. Basically, March Madness is very unpredictable, and a new team wins almost every year. Let's fast forward a couple years and see the 1985 tournament. This is the first year with 64 teams, and the frontrunner, Georgetown. They basically dominate everyone, including the heavy favorite St. John's. But we're not focused on the Hoyas, no. Let's take a look at this 8th seed, Villanova. Their chance to win the tournament is basically nothing, but next thing you know, they're taking down their opponents. Michigan, Maryland, UNC, Memphis. Now they're in the championship round against Georgetown. Villanova is a heavy underdog, and to win they have to play a near-perfect game. Overall, they did, offensively and defensively. In one of the most shocking upsets in basketball history, Villanova won it all. In the 80s, 2 stars from 2 Bulldog schools would meet up as teammates on the Jazz. Also, 2 future teammates on the Bulls would both play in Division II schools. In '85, a shot clock was invented to speed up games, and a year later, the 3-point line was first used. Hey, now we get to recap every tournament in one shining moment. LSU became the first 11 seed in the Final Four. Hot-headed coach Bob Knight won his 3rd. Danny Manning led Kansas to a title, and Glenn Rice led Michigan too. Meanwhile, there are many threats to win it all in March Madness, like Arizona, the powerhouse school with Sean Elliott. fine. NC State, they're making a run. Travel. Seton Hall? Bump. Okay, it's gotta be Michigan State. They're up by 2 to Georgia Tech. Overtime. How about UNLV in 91? Come on, man. That game was 100% fixed. Welcome to the 90s. One thing you gotta know about college sports is that there are 3 divisions. You wanna be in this one. But who's this coach in a bow tie with 830 career wins? Shoot, he's in D3. Get him into D1. Wait, now a bunch of non-D1 schools are joining the main division, creating many sub-conferences. So basically, there are about 300 teams, but only 50 of them are competitive. And guess how many of these schools were blue bloods in the 90s? Just 5. First there's UNC, who won their final title under Dean Smith. Kentucky won 2 titles, and Kansas reached some Final Fours with Aaron Miles. Then, Michigan began to have success with the Fab Five. In 92, 5 freshman starters were recruited by Michigan and would lead them to a championship game. Wait, timeout. Foul. Anyway, what I'm saying is if we keep Chris Webber, Juwan Howard, Jalen Rose, and the other sophomores, we could reach another title. And so they did, where they were neck and neck with North Carolina. Down by 2 with the ball and 20 seconds on the clock, Chris Webber called a timeout when they didn't have a timeout. That forced free throws for North Carolina, which made them win the game. And finally, Duke. In 1980, Coach K arrived at Duke, but they wouldn't reach the finals until the 90s. There, they'd face one of the most talented single-season teams in basketball history at UNLV. But the next year, with Grant Hill, Bobby Hurley, and Christian Laettner, Duke would upset UNLV and later win the title. A Laettner game winner against Kentucky would lead them to a second consecutive, and from then on out, Coach K would become the all-time winningest coach. In 1990, Loyola Marymount star Hank Gathers collapsed on the court. Sadly, Gathers passed, but in commemoration of his life, Loyola rolled their way into the Elite Eight as an 11 seed. 2 new teams joined the SEC in 91, South Carolina and Arkansas. The Gamecocks would stink, but the Razorbacks would win a national title. In a Division II match, the highest scoring college basketball game was played. Also, scandals are becoming much more common in the 90s, including point shaving from a bunch of nerds at Northwestern, and Stephen Headache Smith at Arizona State, along with academic fraud in Minnesota. In the meantime, coaches John Calipari and Rick Pitino are beefing. Hey, now there's a Big 12 conference in 94 and a Mountain West conference in 98. Meanwhile, college basketball is flooding the NBA with first overall picks. David Robinson of Navy and Tim Duncan of Wake Forest would flourish on the Spurs. Shaq of LSU would be drafted by the Magic. Allen Iverson of Georgetown would play on the Sixers. And LeBron James. LeBron James? Wait, he didn't even go to college. Well, apparently, ever since Moses Malone in 74, players from high school have been heading straight to the NBA. Remember Indiana's coach Bob Knight, the hothead? Well, it turns out he kinda got fired for being too much of a hothead. The Arizona Wildcats, Syracuse Orange, UCLA Bruins, Michigan State Spartans, and Maryland Terrapins would all win a title, while the Connecticut Huskies and Florida Gators would win multiple. Welcome to the 2000s. This was about the time the NCAA tournament would skyrocket in popularity. Indiana came back from a 17-point deficit. Mark Few and Gonzaga are consistently falling short in the tournament. And Baylor, well, you don't even want to know what's going on with them. Congrats, Syracuse, you just won the national title. Jim Boeheim, how do you feel about the win? Well, defensively we were lazy, and Carmelo, he didn't have that great of a game, and yeah, it could have been better. In 05, a huge conference alignment was initiated by the ACC, adding 3 schools from the Big East. Speaking of the Big East, Villanova is currently rolling in the tournament until travel.
Bruh.
That helped Roy Williams and UNC win the game and soon the tournament. Hey look, Cinderella runs are becoming much more common in March. 11 seed George Mason shocked UConn to reach the Final Four, and Steph Curry led Davidson to the Elite Eight. In the finals that year, 1 seeds Memphis and Kansas were dueling it out until this happened.
To extend the game. Collins driving, almost lost the handle. Chalmers for the tie. Got it with 2 seconds. Unbelievable.
That game went into overtime, and Memphis' championship hopes were crushed. Memphis, what the heck? Make your gosh darn free throws and that title is ours. Actually, you know what? I want to coach at a better school. Like Kentucky or something. Yeah, I like Kentucky. Oh, and Derrick Rose, here's a cheat sheet and some money. Have fun in the NBA. In 2009, North Carolina had an incredible run, winning by at least 12 points each game. And in 2010, another great run occurred. Duke was in the finals, of course, but who will they face? Will it be the Blue Blood Kentucky? The Rock Chalk Jayhawks? Or maybe Syracuse? How about Butler? Yeah, the Bulldogs are a 5 seed from the Horizon League, and they're just shocking everyone this year. Soon they had a chance to beat Duke in the final seconds.
10 seconds ago, he wants to drive behind the back. On the baseline, fade away shot. Off the rim into Zubac's hands.
Don't worry, Butler made the finals again next year. The field of March Madness was expanded to 68 teams in 11, with every single game of the tournament being nationally televised. And the ACC now has 15 schools. Kentucky hasn't won anything in over a decade, and they need someone. Come on, Kentucky, I came here to be winners, not losers. We need a star player, specifically a 6'10 scoring freak with a unibrow. In one season, Davis won it all. Since, we have pretty small basketball programs and we're really only known for being crushed by big schools or scoring 4 points a half, should we do something cool to stay relevant? What should we do? Let's redesign our courts. FIU has a beach, UTEP has Miners, George Washington has a Capitol, and Memphis Blue Tigers. Meanwhile, while the small schools are redesigning their courts, Kentucky is building a super team. Heading back to small programs, Northern Iowa just made a great upset in 2016. UNI scored a game winner versus Texas, and we're looking to upset another Texas school in the final seconds. How the heck? How about those onions? Villanova made a game-winning buzzer beater for the championship. Anyway, want to hear the record between 16 versus 1 seeds? 0 wins, 135 losses. In 2018, UMBC upset the title favorites Virginia by 20 points in the first round. This is so embarrassing. You should be embarrassed. None of you will ever reach the NBA. Well, unless if you win it all for me next year. Meanwhile, Loyola Illinois and Sister Jean are making an incredible run. In round 1, Loyola was down by 1 to Miami. Now they're up by 1 versus Tennessee. They won 2 more games until falling in the Final Four. Also, Stephen F. Austin upset Duke and snapped their home winning streak. Greg Nigel set a new bracket record, and Dickie V is becoming a legendary announcer. Aw shoot, it's COVID. There are masks, no fans, and worst of all, the NCAA tournament is cancelled. Might as well call it March Sadness now. However, March Madness came back the next year, and Baylor was more than ready for it, winning it all by shutting out the unbeaten Gonzaga. Earlier in that tournament, UCLA had a Cinderella run of their own. Starting in the first 4, they faced Gonzaga in the final 4 and lost by a buzzer beater. Come on, we're too good for this crappy conference. Let's get the heck out of here. Are you serious? Welp, there goes all of our money. Hey, we're also too good for this conference. Let's get the heck out of here. Shucks. At least we got some replacements. In the 2022 March Madness, many upsets occurred, including 15-seed St. Peter's shocking Kentucky to reach the Elite Eight. A year later, Princeton became the 11th 15 seed to upset a 2 seed, along with many others. Currently, there are 358 Division I schools, a game is being held on an aircraft carrier, and the madness in March is still continuing to this day.